Right now, it feels like everything in my world has crumbled, and I'm barely holding on. I need to let this out, even if it's just to anonymous strangers online. For nearly 3 decades, I believed I had a life most people would envy. I married Linda when we were young. She was just 20, and I was 22. We were far from perfect, but we were happy. Together, we created a life from nothing, raising 2 daughters, Betty and Maria, who became the center of my universe. Betty, now 26, has always been driven and ambitious. She was the top of her class in high school, graduated with honors in college, and is preparing to marry her longtime partner this fall. Maria, at 24, is more easygoing. She's the kind of person who lights up a room with her smile and has always had a strong bond with me since she was small. I truly believed I had a strong connection with both of them. Linda and I, at least from my perspective, shared a stable and loving marriage. We faced our share of obstacles, tight finances during the early years, occasional disagreements, and a few health scares, but we always made it through. I thought we were a team. I imagine us aging together, reminiscing about our past while sitting side by side on a quiet porch. I loved her with all I had. Then, last week, everything unraveled. The day started like any ordinary weekday. Linda mentioned she was going out to dinner with Betty and Maria. These girls' nights were a regular thing, a time for them to connect and talk about things they preferred to keep between themselves. I never had an issue with that. On the contrary, I was proud of how close they were. It made me feel like I'd done something right as a husband and father, fostering a family filled with love. That evening, while Linda was upstairs getting ready, I was in the kitchen sipping coffee and casually scrolling through news articles on my phone. Then her phone buzzed on the counter, a sound I barely registered at first. She often got texts from the girls, especially when they were coordinating plans. Without thinking, I picked it up. What I did next isn't something I'm proud of. I had no reason to be suspicious, no justification to invade her privacy, yet something compelled me to open the message. It came from an unfamiliar number. The text read, "Can't wait to see you tonight." I froze, completely stunned. My initial reaction was disbelief. Surely there had to be a logical explanation. Maybe it wasn't what it appeared to be. I kept staring at the message, my thoughts spiraling. Eventually, I opened the entire thread, and what I found shattered my heart. The conversation wasn't lengthy, but the few words exchanged told me more than enough. The messages were from her boss, and they were making plans to have dinner, but it was obvious this was no ordinary business meeting. The tone was warm, even romantic. Earlier messages confirmed it. "I miss you," he'd written. And Linda had replied, "Once a week isn't enough. I miss you too." I felt sick. My chest tightened. My hands trembled so badly I nearly dropped the phone. This was the woman I had loved for almost 30 years. The woman I believed would be by my side for the rest of my life. And she was cheating on me. I was overwhelmed. A part of me wanted to confront her immediately, march upstairs and demand the truth. But I couldn't move. I was in complete shock, still trying to make sense of everything. I needed clarity. I had to be sure. Soon after, Linda came downstairs, looking radiant, dressed for a night out. She gave me a warm smile, kissed my cheek, and casually said, "Don't wait up, okay?" Her voice sounded so normal, so comforting, like nothing was out of place. Somehow, I managed to keep my face calm and replied, "Have fun with the girls." The moment she walked out the door, I picked up her phone again and activated location sharing. I had never done anything like that before. I'd never even thought of spying on her, or anyone, for that matter. But in that moment, none of that mattered. I needed answers. I sat still for a while, staring at the screen, waiting for her location to update. When it finally did, my heart dropped even lower. She wasn't heading to the usual restaurant where she met the girls. She was going somewhere else, a place our family had visited many times together. Quickly, I texted both Betty and Maria, "What time are you meeting Mom for dinner?" Their replies came almost instantly. Betty said, 7 o'clock. "Can't wait to see her," and Maria echoed something similar. That's when the realization hit me like a brick. They were lying. My own daughters were lying to me. I didn't want to accept it, but the truth was undeniable. Linda wasn't the only one keeping secrets. My daughters were involved in this betrayal, too. I waited a bit longer, continuing to monitor Linda's location until she finally arrived at the restaurant. My heart was pounding as I grabbed my car keys and drove there. Once I arrived, I parked the car and scanned the inside of the restaurant through the large front window. It didn't take long before I spotted her. She sat tucked away at a corner table near the back of the restaurant, her boss by her side. Their hands were intertwined, laughter dancing between them, completely unaware that I stood just a few feet away, watching in silence. The sight struck like a blade to my chest. Without even thinking, I reached for my phone and snapped a picture. I couldn't quite say why. Maybe I needed tangible proof that it was really happening, that I wasn't simply seeing things. Afterward, I walked out, climbed into my car, and just sat there, staring at the image of my wife and another man, a flood of emotions consuming me: fury, sorrow, disbelief. I was paralyzed. I had no idea how to approach her or even begin a conversation about it. So, I chose silence, at least for now. Instead, I opened our family group chat, dropped the photo in with a blunt caption, "Glad you're enjoying girls' dinner," then powered down my phone and drove to my brother's place. I wasn't ready to face the chaos that would inevitably follow. That night, I laid awake in his guest room, my eyes fixed on the ceiling, my thoughts spiraling. I kept wondering how my life had unraveled so swiftly. I had always considered myself a decent husband, a responsible father. But at that moment, I couldn't be sure of anything. Everything I believed about my home, my relationship, my family, none of it felt true anymore. I couldn't bring myself to return home. After sharing that picture, I simply drove, aimlessly, until I ended up at my brother's. It was well past midnight, but he opened the door without hesitation, sensing something was wrong without needing any details. I didn't go into everything right then. I just told him I needed a place to crash for the night. He offered me a beer, but I declined. I wasn't looking for conversation. I just wanted to be alone with my thoughts. I spent that night on the couch, wide-eyed and sleepless, my mind a whirlwind of memories and questions. I couldn't get the image out of my head: Linda smiling at her boss, their closeness, the way their fingers were laced together like a pair of love-struck teenagers. It made my stomach churn. How long had this been going on? How had I been so oblivious? And then came thoughts of Betty and Maria. The ease with which they lied to me added a whole new layer of pain. I had always tried to raise them with honesty and strong values, yet here they were, helping their mother hide a devastating secret. It wasn't just Linda who had betrayed me, it was my daughters too. The following morning, I powered my phone back on. Instantly, a flood of notifications poured in: calls, texts, voicemails. Linda had tried to reach me more times than I could count. Betty and Maria had messaged as well. I didn't have it in me to go through everything at once, so I skimmed. Linda's messages were exactly what I'd expected. Pleased to talk, attempts to explain, reassurances that it wasn't what it looked like. I avoided her voicemails. Hearing her voice would only reignite the storm brewing inside me. Maria's messages hit differently. Her texts came in a string of apologies. "Dad, I'm so sorry. I never should have lied. I feel awful about this. Please don't hate me. Can we talk? I think I ruined everything." She even had her boyfriend, Josh, reach out. "Hey, this is Josh. Maria's really upset and having a hard time. She's scared she's lost you. Please give her a call." But I couldn't bring myself to respond. I didn't have the words. Betty, however, sent a message that cut even deeper. It was brief and emotionless. "Dad, I'm sorry you found out like this, but I think you're overreacting. Don't end a good marriage over a single mistake." A single mistake? Overreacting? My heart pounded with rage. This wasn't just a lapse in judgment, it was a betrayal on every level. Linda had broken my trust, and my daughters had stood by her, weaving lies to keep me in the dark. I kept thinking back to all those dinners they claimed to be attending, their innocent faces as they told me half-truths, pretending everything was fine. That entire day, I stewed in heartbreak and fury. My brother tried to get me to talk, but I wasn't ready to let any of it out. I needed time to process, to make sense of the storm inside me. Eventually, by the afternoon, I realized I couldn't stay silent forever. I had to say something. I started by messaging Maria. "Maria, I love you, but what you've done has deeply wounded me. I need some space right now." She replied instantly. "I'm truly sorry, Dad. I'll never forgive myself for this. I love you so much." I didn't respond. Then, I reached out to Betty. "Betty, this isn't a minor misstep. It's a betrayal of everything our family stands for. Please don't contact me until I'm ready to talk." She didn't write back, but I had no doubt she showed Linda because soon after, Linda began texting again. "Please don't blame the girls. They were only trying to protect me. They didn't mean to hurt you." I ignored her messages. I wasn't interested in hearing excuses anymore. Later that evening, I finally opened up and shared the entire story with my brother. I showed him all of it: the messages, the photo, every damning piece of evidence. His reaction was intense. He was outraged on my behalf. "You have to let them go," he told me with a stern look. "They've shown they don't value you. Why should you keep people like that around?" His words echoed in my mind, and although painful, I knew deep down he was speaking the truth. Still, the thought of cutting my daughters out of my life was something I couldn't easily come to terms with. That evening, my thoughts spiraled. My relationship with Linda was clearly beyond repair. There was no hope left, and I didn't even want to salvage it. But Betty and Maria? Could I ever forgive them? Could I ever see them the same way again? Knowing the truth changed everything. I realized I needed space, time to breathe, to think, and to make sense of what had happened. One thing, however, was clear. The life I once knew had come to a quiet, devastating end. The collapse didn't come with a dramatic explosion. Instead, it was a slow, painful unraveling that clung to me like smoke. When I got back to my brother's house that night, I didn't feel angry anymore. Instead, there was a deep numbness. The fire of rage, disbelief, and sorrow that had roared earlier now smoldered into a heavy, unshakable grief. Everything I thought was stable in my world was collapsing, and I stood helplessly watching it fall apart. As I turned my phone back on, the silence struck me immediately. Hours earlier, it had buzzed endlessly with missed calls and frantic texts. Now there was nothing. No more pleading messages from Maria. No further attempts from Betty. Not even a single voicemail from Linda. It was as if they had all realized I wasn't going to respond and decided to stop trying. Or maybe they were just taking time to regroup. Whatever the reason, the quiet was unnerving. And with the stillness came too much room for thought. Once the anger had faded, the pain settled in, along with a torrent of questions that circled relentlessly in my mind. How long had this betrayal been happening? How many times had Linda lied straight to my face? Did Betty and Maria ever feel guilty for standing by her side instead of mine? Or had betrayal become so normal to them that they didn't even think twice about hiding the truth from their father? After hours of silence, swallowed by my own thoughts, I sat down with my brother in his living room. The weight of everything I was carrying had become too much to bear alone. I needed to share it, to say it out loud, to finally be heard without judgment. Even if nothing could fix what had been broken, I needed someone to understand. Sitting across from him, my hands trembled as I began to speak. The pain in my chest pressed down hard, but I forced myself to go on. "I found something on Linda's phone," I started, my voice strained with emotion. There were texts. Lies. I couldn't pretend anymore. And then it led to something worse. He didn't say a word, just nodded, encouraging me to continue. I laid it all out. The messages between Linda and her boss, the lies my daughters had told, the way they had all worked together to keep me in the dark. I even told him about the photo I snapped at the restaurant, Linda sitting across from her boss, smiling. I had just stood there, frozen, each second sinking me deeper into disbelief. I couldn't take it anymore. "I sent the picture to our family group chat," I said, my throat tightening. I didn't care about the fallout. They needed to see it. They had to know. My brother leaned back, rubbing his face, his expression darkening. I could see the fury building behind his eyes, but he stayed silent for a while, just processing everything. Then finally, he spoke, his tone sharp and tense. "That's seriously messed up. I don't even know what to say. I always thought Linda was too put together, too flawless. But this? And the girls, that's just incredibly low." Hearing those words gave me the tiniest bit of relief. I needed someone else to confirm that I wasn't imagining it, that my pain was real and justified. My brother's anger validated my own, if only for a moment. Still, it didn't erase the hurt. It didn't make the betrayal easier to swallow. His frustration was fleeting, while mine had been brewing for hours, growing heavier with each passing minute. "I don't know what to do," I confessed, my voice cracking under the strain. "I can't look at them the same way. I don't even want to go back to that house. Everything's falling apart. My marriage is gone, and now I can't even trust my daughters. They lied to me. They protected her instead of telling me the truth." He stared at me, thoughtful and silent, trying to find the right words. After a long pause, he spoke again, his voice calm but unyielding. "You need to cut them all off. They clearly don't respect you. Why should you keep them in your life?" His words hit hard, and I felt a stab of guilt. Was I really capable of cutting them out of my life just like that? Could I truly walk away from my own family? The thought alone felt unbearable. Yet deep inside, I understood my brother's point. Every single one of them had let me down in their own way. The trust one once held so firmly had been shattered, leaving nothing to rebuild. "I don't know," I muttered, feeling overwhelmed and unsure. "Cutting them out. I'm not sure I can go that far. Not when it comes to Betty and Maria. They're still my daughters. My brother gave a slow nod, showing empathy, though I could see the frustration lingering in his eyes. I get where you're coming from, he said quietly. But you can't keep letting them walk all over you like this. You've got to step back and think about what's right for you. What about you? I asked, unsure of his next move. But I didn't have the strength to hear an answer, not then. My thoughts were tangled in confusion, and my emotions kept colliding like waves in a storm. I need time, I said, barely able to raise my voice above a whisper. Time to process all of this. I can't go back to pretending everything is fine. This isn't just some mistake, it's betrayal. And I have no idea how to handle that. He didn't respond with advice or offer any magical solution. He stayed beside me in silence, showing through his presence that he understood. Some things didn't need fixing right away, they just needed space. Space to breathe. Space to think. Space to begin understanding what had just happened and where I was supposed to go from here. By morning, I had reached a quiet resolve. I couldn't allow my anger to trap me any longer. I needed to start moving, start doing. And the first step was securing my financial situation. I spent most of the day cutting ties, closing joint accounts, shifting funds into a private account that Linda couldn't access, and locking down anything that might be vulnerable in the coming divorce. I couldn't afford to be distracted by emotions when my financial future was on the line. But my actions weren't just about Linda. As I reviewed the damage, I kept returning to the tens of thousands of dollars I had poured into Betty's future, her wedding, her dreams. That money was gone, spent on someone who had looked me in the eye and lied, who had helped her mother deceive me. The nausea that came with that thought was overwhelming. I made a note to bring it up with my lawyer. Maybe I wouldn't be able to reclaim those funds, but I was done spending another dollar on people who had betrayed me. Later in the day, I took the next major step. I began reaching out to lawyers. Following my brother's advice, I scheduled appointments with several before making a decision. The hours passed in a blur as I recounted my story over and over in sterile offices to professionals who did their best to remain impartial. Still, I could see it in their eyes, judgment, maybe pity. Either way, it didn't matter. By the end of the day, I had chosen someone. She was sharp, no nonsense, and unafraid to be aggressive when needed. I told her exactly what I wanted, a swift, clean divorce. No drama, no undeserved wins for Linda. The lawyer assured me she had dealt with similar cases before and was confident she could protect my interests. While I wasn't completely at peace, for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was on solid ground. That night, as I sat alone in my brother's guest room, I began preparing for the inevitable confrontation with Linda. I hadn't spoken to her yet, mostly because I wasn't sure I could stay calm. I didn't want to give her the power of an emotional reaction or the satisfaction of an explanation. And honestly, what could she say that would change anything? Still, I knew I couldn't avoid her forever. So I started writing. I wrote down everything, the questions I needed answered, the emotions I couldn't say out loud, the points I had to make. I wasn't sure I'd be able to say it all in person, but getting it on paper gave me a sense of clarity and control. It helped me feel less like someone who had been wronged, and more like someone taking their life back. The most painful part, though, was thinking about Betty and Maria. I hadn't spoken a word to them since those texts, and the thought of reaching out felt impossible. How do you start a conversation with your children after realizing they've been lying to you for months? How do you rebuild something that feels so completely broken? I wanted to believe Maria meant it when she apologized. I wanted to think she regretted being part of this mess. But trust? That was something I couldn't just hand back, not after everything. And Betty, her dismissive, cold response had hurt more than I could admit. I always knew she leaned more toward Linda, but I never imagined she would side against me in something so serious. It felt like she had made her choice, and I wasn't part of it. That night, I reached another conclusion. I wasn't going to be the one to reach out. If they wanted to talk, if they truly wanted to fix what had been broken, they'd have to take that step. I wasn't going to chase after them, pleading for their forgiveness or explanations. They had made their decisions. As I lay there on the bed, staring blankly at the ceiling, a sense of unexpected peace settled over me, something I hadn't felt since everything had fallen apart. I no longer felt entirely adrift. I had crafted a plan. It wasn't flawless, and it certainly wouldn't solve all my problems, but it was a beginning. I had made up my mind. I was through with playing the victim. From that point forward, I was going to reclaim control of my life. After spending 2 days secluded in my brother's guest room, ignoring incoming calls and sorting through the whirlwind of emotions, I knew it was time to confront Linda. Avoiding her wasn't going to solve anything. I had things that needed to be said, things she needed to hear. Late that night, I sent her a message. We need to talk tomorrow at 10 in the morning. At the house. She replied within moments. I'll be there. Please just let me explain. The nerve of that response stunned me. Explain what exactly? I thought. There was nothing left that could justify what she'd done. I had no interest in listening to weak excuses or half-hearted explanations. I didn't bother replying. I would save every word for when we sat across from each other. Sleep was hard to come by, and by dawn, I was up and on my way. I drove to the house, once our shared home. The moment I crossed the threshold, a powerful wave of memory swept over me. Bittersweet nostalgia crashed against a tide of bitterness. This place had once been our sanctuary, where we'd raised our daughters, celebrated birthdays and holidays, built a life. Now, it was just an empty shell, stained by everything that had surfaced. Linda arrived precisely on time. She walked in cautiously, eyes swollen and red, as though sleep had eluded her for days. She clutched her phone tightly, like it was her only armor, and right away, I noticed the absence of her wedding ring. That tiny detail hit me like a blow to the chest. Thanks for meeting me, she said quietly, standing just inside the door, hesitant to come further. There's no need to thank me, I replied, my voice colder than I intended. I'm not here to make this easier for you. That set the tone for the entire conversation. We sat down at the dining table, the same one where we'd shared countless meals as a family. Linda began to speak, her voice trembling. She recited a familiar script, saying everything I expected. It wasn't serious. It didn't mean anything. It was just a mistake. She kept repeating herself, hoping that repetition would somehow rewrite reality. Stop, I interrupted, my patience rapidly thinning. I'm not interested in your excuses. I want the truth. She stared at me, puzzled, as though she didn't quite grasp what I was after. How long? I asked firmly. She paused, clearly calculating what response might minimize the damage. A few months, she muttered, her voice uncertain. Try again, I snapped, anger bubbling up inside. Her expression shifted, collapsing under the weight of guilt. Almost a year, she admitted in a whisper. A year. Her words hit like a brick wall. I clenched my fist beneath the table, doing everything I could to restrain the storm inside me. A full year of betrayal. My voice trembled with fury. A whole year of lies. A year of you pretending everything was normal. Smiling, hugging, whispering sweet nothings while secretly betraying me. She recoiled, but I had no room left for pity. How many times had she looked me in the eyes, said she loved me, while living a double life? I couldn't comprehend it. How long have they known? I demanded, voice tight with emotion. She flinched, eyes darting away. Not the entire time, she murmured. Just for the past couple of months. My disgust surged. I didn't want to involve them, she added feebly. But you did, I cut in sharply. You made them part of your lies. Do you have the slightest clue what that's done to me? She didn't answer. Instead, she broke down, sobbing uncontrollably, as if her tears could wash away the damage. I never meant for this to happen, she cried. I didn't want to hurt you. I was just so unhappy. Unhappy. My voice echoed off the bare walls, rising with disbelief. You were unhappy, so your solution was to destroy our family? You were miserable, so you cheated and dragged our daughters into this disaster? Do you even realize the gravity of what you've done, Linda? She could only cry harder, her face buried in her hands, offering no response. And for the first time, I didn't feel a shred of sympathy. You've wrecked everything, I said, my voice dropping to a quiet weight. Not just our marriage. You fractured my bond with Betty and Maria. How am I supposed to look them in the eye now? How do I trust them after this? I didn't want them to lie to you, she whispered, tears still falling. I didn't want any of this. Then why did you do it? I asked, my voice rising again. Why didn't you come to me? If you were so unhappy, why not talk to me? Try to work it out. Anything but this. She remained silent. Maybe she didn't have an answer. Maybe she knew nothing she could say would undo what had already been done. After a long, heavy pause, I rose to my feet, clarity washing over me like a final tide. I'm filing for divorce, I said, my tone steady, resolved. You'll be hearing from my lawyer soon. Please, don't go through with this, she pleaded as she rose to her feet, desperation thick in her voice. We can work this out. We can fix everything. My reply was icy. There's nothing left to fix, I said flatly. You made your decision, and now I'm making mine. Just before I stepped out, I turned to look at her one final time. And don't expect me to cover the cost of Betty's wedding anymore. Maybe her boss can handle that. since the two of you are apparently experts at keeping things under wraps. Her expression crumbled, but I didn't stick around to witness the aftermath. As I moved through the house and approached the front door, I halted in the hallway. My eyes landed on the collection of family portraits on the wall. There we were, Linda, Betty, Maria, and me, grinning as though we were the perfect family. I had once cherished those snapshots, but now they felt like a cruel reminder of everything that had unraveled. Without thinking, I reached for the nearest frame, a photo from Betty's high school graduation, and hurled it against the wall. The glass shattered instantly, and for a fleeting second, I felt a surge of satisfaction. But the feeling quickly vanished. Walking toward my car, a stark realization settled in. This wasn't the end. The clash with Linda might have concluded, but the real storm was just beginning. I still had to face Betty and Maria. I still needed to figure out how to keep going. And most painfully, I had to accept that the life I believed I was living, the life I had built for nearly 3 decades, was over. The confrontation with Linda had brought clarity, but not peace. If anything, it made the betrayal more tangible, more devastating. My anger toward her was intense, but targeted. I understood her choices now, even if they disgusted me. So I walked away. But dealing with Betty and Maria was far messier. They were my daughters, a part of me. Yet they had chosen Linda's side. The day after I told Linda about the divorce, I made the decision to talk with each of them separately. I couldn't just erase them from my life without at least understanding their side. It wasn't going to be an easy or light-hearted conversation. The bond we once shared had been fractured, and I had to see if there was any chance it could be rebuilt. I started with Maria. She had always been the more emotional one, and her texts lately had been frantic and full of panic. I asked her to meet me at a park not far from my brother's place. The moment she arrived, it was clear she hadn't slept properly in days. Her eyes were swollen, and her hands fidgeted nervously the second she sat down next to me on the bench. She broke into tears almost instantly. "Dad, I'm so sorry," she sobbed, her voice trembling. "I didn't know how to tell you. I didn't want to hurt you." My jaw tightened as I fought to keep my anger under control. "Then why lie to me?" I asked, my voice sharp. "Why cover for your mother? Did you think I'd never find out?" She wiped at her face, her expression full of guilt and confusion. "It wasn't like that," she said quickly. "She told me a few months ago." I was furious, but she begged me to stay quiet. Said it was just a phase, that she would stop. I didn't know what to do. My fists clenched involuntarily. "You didn't know what to do? You knew it was wrong, but you chose to protect her anyway. You stood by and deceived me. You betrayed me, Maria." Her head shook as her sobs grew heavier. "I didn't want to hurt you, Dad. I swear." I leaned in, my tone low but burning. "But you already did. Both of you did. And now I'm left picking up the pieces, all the lies, all the betrayal, and the heartache of knowing my own daughters didn't stand by me." I stared at her, trying to absorb the pain behind her words. "So, instead of telling me the truth, you thought it was better to just keep quiet?" I asked. She stared at the ground, her voice barely audible. I believed she would stop. I didn't want to destroy the family if there was a chance she might fix it. I didn't think it would go this far. "That's not an excuse," I said, my tone cold. "You can't justify your choices by saying you didn't know. You knew she was cheating, and you let it continue. You stood by while she deceived me. Do you understand how that feels?" She cried harder, burying her face in her hands. A part of me felt a stab of guilt seeing her so broken, but I pushed it aside. This wasn't about sympathy. It was about the trust they'd destroyed. "I'm not telling you this to punish you," I said, keeping my tone steady though the pain crept through. "I need you to understand the depth of this hurt. I honestly don't know if I can ever trust you again like I used to." Maria nodded, her shoulders shaking violently. "I'll do whatever it takes to fix this, Dad. Anything. Just tell me what to do." I didn't have an answer for her. I told her I needed space to think. And then I walked away. The weight of everything bore down on me as I prepared for my next meeting. Talking to Betty felt like stepping into an entirely different world. I asked her to meet me at a coffee shop. I thought a public place might help keep things calm. She arrived 10 minutes late, looking polished and composed, as though nothing in her world had changed. That single remark immediately rubbed me the wrong way. She sat down with a casual air and offered a quick, "Thanks for meeting me." I didn't waste a second. "Betty, why didn't you tell me about your mother's affair?" I asked sharply, tension gripping my voice. She exhaled deeply and reclined in her seat, her composure frustratingly calm. "Dad, I didn't want to get involved. That's between you and Mom. I figured it was best if I stayed out of it." Stayed out of it. I echoed, leaning closer, my voice rising. You didn't stay out of it, Betty. You lied to me. You covered for her. That's not neutrality. That's taking her side. I wasn't choosing sides, she snapped back, suddenly defensive. I was just trying to keep the peace. I didn't want to escalate things. For whom, exactly? I demanded, unable to contain my fury. For me, or for your mother? She stayed silent. That silence spoke volumes. You're a grown woman. I continued, my voice firm but simmering with anger. You're about to get married. If your fiancé betrayed you the way your mother betrayed me, would you want everyone around you to lie and protect him? Or would you want someone to be honest with you? That's not the same, she replied, irritated. Mom made a mistake. That doesn't mean you need to destroy everything because of it. Her words stung. A mistake? Is that really how you see it? I asked, nearly stunned. She didn't just slip up once. She betrayed me repeatedly. It is a mistake, she insisted, her tone now edged with defensiveness. Everyone messes up. Dad, you can't just destroy everything over one bad decision. One bad decision? I repeated, shaking my head in disbelief. Are you even listening to yourself? This wasn't a moment of poor judgment. It was betrayal. From your mother, from you, from Maria. And now you're acting like I'm the unreasonable one. I'm not saying that, she responded quickly, her voice softening slightly. I just think you're being too severe. I know you're hurt. I understand that. But if you cut us off, you'll regret it. We're still your family. Family doesn't lie like this, I said, my tone rigid with pain. Family doesn't help destroy what someone has built. You and Maria didn't just lie. You shattered my trust. And I can't see a way forward from that. She folded her arms tightly, her face set in frustration. So that's it. You're just going to erase us? Pretend like we don't exist. I'm not pretending anything. If I have to, I will erase you from my life, I replied coldly. We sat in silence, the air between us heavy with the weight of what had been said. After several long moments, I stood. I've said everything I needed to. I looked at her one last time. I truly hope you never find yourself in the same position I'm in now. She didn't say a word or try to stop me as I walked out. That night, alone in my brother's guest room, I replayed the conversations in my mind. Maria's remorse felt genuine, though I couldn't tell if forgiveness would ever come. Betty was a different story. Her unwillingness to admit how deeply she had hurt me made it obvious. She didn't think she had done anything wrong. For the first time, I seriously considered removing both of them from my life. It wasn't something I wanted, but the thought of repairing what they'd broken seemed impossible. That night, I made up my mind. The next morning, I contacted my lawyer and asked for an update to my will. Betty and Maria were to be removed as beneficiaries. My savings, my retirement fund, and my house would now go to my sister and her children. They had never betrayed me. I could trust them. When I told my brother, he didn't argue. You're doing what's right, he said. They made their choices, and now they'll face the consequences. The fallout came quickly. The very next day, Maria called me, sobbing uncontrollably. Dad, please don't do this, she pleaded through the tears. I know I made mistakes, but I love you. I don't care about the inheritance. I just don't want to lose you. Her words struck something inside me, but I stayed firm. Maria, I'll always love you, I said, keeping my voice steady. But that love doesn't mean I can forget what happened. I need time. Maybe we'll be able to rebuild someday, but for now, I can't have you in my life. She continued crying, but I stayed resolute until the call ended. Betty, unsurprisingly, took a different path. She sent a long, emotionally charged email, accusing me of being cruel and vindictive. You're punishing me for trying to keep the peace, she wrote. I've only tried to avoid conflict, and now you're ruining my wedding over something that has nothing to do with me. I didn't respond. There was no use. Then Linda stepped in. She sent her own email, carefully worded and full of polished reasoning, as if I'd be swayed by her eloquence. She pleaded with me not to exclude the girls from the will, arguing it wasn't right to punish them for choices she had made. Unbelievably, she claimed that doing so would cause irreversible harm to the family. Really? You're going to pull that move? I muttered under my breath, rolling my eyes at the email she'd sent. I didn't even bother replying to Linda. She could throw whatever she wanted my way, but the truth had already come out, and no amount of twisting could change it. As the days ticked by, I began to feel a little lighter. The anger hadn't vanished, but the crushing weight of betrayal wasn't as paralyzing anymore. Letting go hadn't been simple. It was painful, but it had to be done. I had to shield myself not just financially, but emotionally too. And for the first time in what felt like forever, I could breathe again. It's now been 4 weeks since I removed Betty and Maria from my will. They haven't reached out to me directly, and honestly, I'm okay with that. Word got back to me through mutual friends that Betty's been scrambling, trying to cover the cost of the wedding I had been funding. I can't say I feel sorry for her, not even a little. She picked her side when she backed her mother, and now she's living with what that choice brought her. Betty's marriage unraveled almost as quickly as mine had. In a bitter twist of fate, her story started to resemble mine more than she could have imagined. Not long after tying the knot, things started to shift. Greg, her husband, began acting distant. Betty brushed it off at first, said it was job stress, the long hours, the usual excuses. But things escalated. His behavior changed so drastically she couldn't ignore it anymore. When she finally confronted him, the truth spilled out, and it was even uglier than she'd feared. Greg had been unfaithful for months. The discovery hit her like a wave of concrete. She'd been through betrayal before, but this cut deeper. A text message carelessly left on his phone revealed everything. When she asked for an explanation, Greg barely engaged. Defensive, short-tempered, unwilling to admit anything beyond the bare minimum. He tried to pass it off as a fleeting mistake. But Betty knew better. This wasn't some slip. It was a repeated betrayal of trust and love. There was no saving the relationship. Divorce was the only option left. Betty couldn't stay married to someone who had obliterated the fragile connection they still had. As the legal battle started, Greg showed his true colors. He wanted half of everything. The irony was painful. Betty had nothing left. After years of standing by a man who deceived her, she now faced a future filled with emotional wounds and shattered dreams. As for me, my own divorce had dragged on, leaving emotional scars that hadn't yet faded. I learned the hard way not to make the same mistakes again. I had to cut all ties with Linda, financially and otherwise. I transferred everything I owned to my sister and her children, the house, the savings, even my retirement fund. I couldn't stomach the thought of Linda or our daughters receiving anything from me. They hadn't earned it, especially not Linda. But the real heartbreak came when Betty came back into the picture, her face swollen with tears, asking if I could help her through her own divorce. I had nothing left to offer. No home, no money, no resources. I'd already given it all away. The silence that hung between us in that moment was unbearable. I wanted desperately to help her, but my hands were tied. And with that realization came a bitter ache. Everything I'd built, every cent I'd worked so hard to earn, was gone. My marriage to Linda had left me empty, with nothing but broken fragments of a life that once felt complete. Now, all I could do was live with the fallout of the choices I had made. I couldn't rescue Betty the way I once might have. All I could do was watch as she walked the same painful path I had, entangled in the same cycle of deception and heartbreak. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.